Call the meeting to order. First thing we need is we have Mr. Rosenbaum and Mr. Salzer that are wanting to call in. I'd like a motion to allow them to call in, to be in the meeting. Rachel and Steve, thank you. Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying.
Do a roll call vote, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
that's right, all right.
All right, so Chairman Fennell, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice Chairwoman Relaford. Aye. Ms. Allison.
Aye.
Ms. Pastucha stepped out of the room. Mr. Rand. Aye. Mr. Renaud. Aye. Mr. Ricker.
Aye.
Ms. Williams.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Now we need to have a motion for the suspension of the rules so that, because we cannot have any public to view our meeting, so can I have a motion? Who was that, Rob? And a second? Okay. Jennifer? Right, will you take
Right.
roll?
Chairman Fennell.
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Relaford.
Yes.
Ms. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Dillon. Mr. Rand. Mr. Renaud. Mr. Ricker.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Mr. Salzer.
Aye.
Ms. Williams. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. We have approval of the minutes from April 29th, 2020, May 7th, 2020, and May 14th, 2020. Could I have a motion? Kate, thank you. Second? Sharon, thank you. Take roll.
Chairman Fennell.
Aye.
Vice Chairwoman Relaford. Ms. Allison.
Aye.
Mr. Dillon. Ms. Pastucha. Mr. Rand. Mr. Renaud. Mr. Ricker.
Aye.
Mr. Rosenbaum. Mr. Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Mr. Salzer.
Aye.
Ms. Williams. Motion carries unanimously, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next item, we have a resolution for the ordinance authorization, the issue of the general obligation refunding bonds. I have a motion on that first. Sharon? Rachel, thank you. For discussion, you want to give an update on that? That's on the Headington Oaks?
Happy to, Mr. Chairman. And both myself and Mr. Bruner are available to answer any questions that you might have. So we've talked about on multiple occasions the fact that the bonds for the construction of Headington Oaks are callable in the fourth quarter of this year. The first necessary step in the process of refunding, which is the technical term for refinancing bonds, is the ordinance that's in front of you today. What that does is it does several things. It puts the bond community on notice that it's your intent to do the refunding. It also starts that process. With that, I can answer any questions you might have. It's a pretty straightforward document in terms of what's required to start the process. Mr. Bruner can also try and answer any questions you might have.
Okay, that was about a $43 million, was that not, obligation bond?
The original issuance was $42 million, and we will the principal that would be eligible to be refunded or refinanced is going to be right around $41 million, a little bit less than that, because we'll have paid right around $1 million of principal between when the issuance was done and now.
Thank you. Sharon?
So if the taxpayers approve the sale of the property, then how does that play into this?
So the refunding can be done anytime after the fourth quarter of this year. So it's not a one and done window. It's when the window opens. And so it would be our recommendation that we open the window with this process. We wait and see what happens with the referendum. And then if the referendum is successful and we're able to successfully find a buyer for the land and the buildings, then we would execute that sale, and then we would apply any net proceeds of that sale to essentially make a principal payment, and therefore lowering what you would be refunding when we do the refunding process.
Yes.
Can you just talk about why this needs to be an ordinance?
In simplest of terms, that's what the bond covenants require.
Any other questions? Anyone?
One here.
Yes, Steve?
I know you mentioned in the write-up that the coupon rate may be different once we sell. Any idea of the potential delta in the coupon rate between a government obligated bond versus what we would get?
Randy, you want to try and answer that?
The coupon rate, so in the write-up here in the last paragraph, it talks about that if we sell a facility and reissue the debt, the reissued debt will be taxable, and by default will have a slightly higher coupon rate. I'm just trying to get an idea of what the slightly higher coupon, if it's a half a point, or where does it fall?
It's pretty close. We just got an email from our financial people just in the last few days, maybe even yesterday, that I haven't had a real chance to go over the numbers, but I know last time they were talking, the delta isn't that great right now. Maybe a quarter to a half point.
Okay. So it shouldn't be a big impact, I guess. Is kind of, just wanted to make sure I understood that the impact between a taxable and a non-taxable debt sounds like we're not in too bad a shape between the two.
Because of historically low rates, that is correct.
Yeah, our current condition of the historically low rates has given us a benefit. Thank you.
Plus, we have the opportunity to change the length of time for the bond,
Yep.
and that would possibly lower the payment plan. Any other questions? Seeing none, would you take the roll?
Chairman Fennel,
Aye.
Vice Chairwoman Relaford, Member Allison,
Aye.
Member Dillon, Member Pastucha, Member Rand, Member Renault, Member Ricker,
Aye.
Member Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Member Salzer,
Aye.
Member Williams. Motion carries unanimously, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Executive committee action, we have the review the executive committee session minutes, and we do that every 6 months, so I will refer to our state's attorney, Ms. Boswell. Oh, yes, we better have a motion. Kate, is there a second?
Second.
Steve, thank you. Now,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Chairman indicated, we're on our 6-month review of executive session minutes, reviewing the index. It is the recommendation of the state's attorney that all previously held minutes continue to be held because the need for confidentiality does still exist, and also recommend to destroy executive session audio recordings that are more than 2 years old, except for those that relate to pending litigation.
okay. Would you take roll?
Chairman Fennel,
Aye.
Vice Chairwoman Relaford, Ms. Allison,
Aye.
Mr. Dillon, Ms. Pastucha, Mr. Rand, Mr. Renault, Mr. Ricker,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenbaum,
Aye.
Mr. Salzer,
Aye.
Ms. Williams. Motion carries unanimously, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there any other miscellaneous from any items from anybody? No? Well, I will turn the chair over to Mr. Rand. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fennel, I was going to see if you'd be willing to call the executive committee meeting to order and under suspension of rules. I'd like to nominate you to be the chair pro tem for the day, and I'll sit back here. Thank you. The air conditioning back here is really good.